We're getting a new Transformers movie in a few months, so why not revisit the previous film? The spin-off turned soft reboot about Bumblebee's first adventure on Earth. What better way to revisit it than by responding to a negative review? A quite unique take, as everyone has the opposite opinion. Presenting Rendan Lovell's Why Bumblebee Actually Sucks couch commentary. Despite having a bad feeling about this, I'm more than ready to respond to this video. Let's get started.
So Bumblebee is the latest film in the Transformers series. It is a prequel to Transformers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on.
Wait, at the time of this video's release, there's only 6 movies. So what does he mean by and so on? This is already starting off on the wrong foot.
It's a movie, as you could tell, that is basically just the origin story for one of the fan-favorite characters, Bumblebee, a robot Camaro that can sometimes talk but sometimes can't.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing, isn't it? I find it downright annoying, as every other version of Bumblebee is more of a character, because they speak and interact like a person, and not act like a frickin' puppy dog. This movie suffers like the rest of the films, but to a lesser degree. Thank God for that, at least.
And he finally has his own prequel movie. And from early reviews, early test screenings, audience reactions, this movie was overall positive. In fact, it has some of the best reviews of any Transformers in the series. It is one of the most widely regarded Transformers movies of all time.
Well, the last movie was Transformers The Last Knight, which was released over a year before. Contrary to what most critics believe, general audiences have a good memory, so they can appreciate the improvements and fixes made with Bumblebee in comparison to the blight on humanity that was the previous movie. The Last Jedi's release in that window between the two films did help get the taste of The Last Knight out of everyone's mouths, especially with Disney and the director Rian Johnson negatively targeting a segment of the fan base that disliked the divisive Star Wars film. I dare say that negative behavior improved the potential reception for Bumblebee, but hindered a different film. A different film we will likely talk more about later.
Which is a weird sentence, as this is still a movie about robots that punch and shoot each other.
Oh no, he's one of those critics who scoffs at outlandish ideas like Roger Ebert on video games not being art. If only Ebert lived to see video games now. Okay, real talk. Are we still downplaying the potential of unconventional ideas? Decades ago, we did the same about a flying man in a suit of armor. But now look at us as we cry over that same character's death. Or how about a toy brand being made into a movie? Or a movie just about toys in general? It's such short-sighted thinking.
But the thing with this movie is that I think a lot of people loved is that it takes away a few elements from the Transformers series that a lot of people had problems with. And the number one being Michael Bay. This is the first Transformers film that isn't directed by Michael Bay. And you could tell. I mean, he loves his fast-paced camera movements. He loves cutting very quickly.
Why would he display footage that counters what he's saying? Why do some YouTubers not understand that it ruins your argument? Hopefully, this is the only time he does this in this video. I hope.
Loves the high contrast, high saturation type of shooting, and he loves misogynistic, racist, and horribly uncomfortable humor.
From all my digging into Michael Bay, I theorize this is due to his wide range of humor. We commonly focus on the bad attempts at humor, some justifiably should be called out, but we tend to overlook his subtle contributions, like Mojo the crippled dog. It was Bay's idea to add a chihuahua addicted to painkillers that lives in a birdhouse. He also approves unplanned spur-of-the-moment ideas like this scene. which everyone still finds outright hilarious, and as the director, he could have easily prevented it from making the final cut of the film, since it was just filmed right on the spot. No planning at all, they just filmed it right there because they thought it was funny. And I distinctly remember this scene sending the entire audience in my theater laughing. Yes, I'm that old. When questioned, Michael Bay would ask if it makes the audience laugh and enjoy the movie. And if it does, then, as he put it, he shouldn't really be worried about the critics' complaints about it. At least he can take a joke and walk back some of those decisions, even taking death threats like a champ. You'll be surprised that Michael Bay is more than just explosions.
The only thing Mike asked me when I was reading with him and auditioning, he just asked me if I could run. He's like, "Can you run?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I think so." And the other thing he asked me, he goes, "Do you have a nice stomach?" And I said, "Well, in my opinion, yes, I do." So I figured, all right, I'm going to be running, hopefully not naked, but I'll be running in a belly shirt, maybe.
For better and for worse.
And that has all been stripped away from Bumblebee, and I think because all of this that has been stripped out of this movie, a lot of people just automatically liked it because that stuff wasn't present, and to be fair, it was nice not seeing that stuff.
The box office numbers don't match with his statement. If what he says is true, then Bumblebee's numbers should bounce right back to closer to 1 billion instead of hovering over 435 million. The positive changes implemented into Bumblebee the film successfully healed the overall long-term health of the franchise, as we see with the record-breaking excitement for the next Transformers film. I say again, it's not all solely on the box office, and even then, they're not totally accurate, as hidden costs can affect the profit from a film.
It was really nice to see a movie in the Transformers series that had some cohesion to it, that wasn't cringeworthy and embarrassing and dreadful and terrible across the board in every single way.
Everything? Heck, I despise Age of Extinction and would personally drag it down to hell in order to see it suffer for eternity. But I can regard there are some good moments, like Ratchet's dying loyalty to Optimus as a strong self-contained scene.
This is the best movie since Transformers 1, which literally is not saying anything because 2, 3, 4, and 5 are some of the worst blockbuster movies ever created.
Did he slander Dark of the Moon? Okay, that statement is appropriate for 4 and 5, and Revenge of the Fallen is tolerable, especially with the outside knowledge that racism was eradicated so hard, they didn't return for a film that planned to kill them off. Additionally, Revenge of the Fallen is an interesting exercise to see how Michael Bay writes a script on the fly mid-production, as the whole writer's strike in Hollywood forced him into that situation. It's a recommendation from me, sorry for that reason. Well, I'm kind of a film nerd, so you might not want to watch it.
But just because this is the best movie since Transformers 1, is it actually a good movie, as a lot of people are saying? No.
I strongly disagree, and I've seen this movie to the point I'm desensitized to it. It's one of the untold negatives about working at a movie theater. You see the film way too much.
It's not. I didn't get to see this movie in theaters. In fact, I decided to skip it entirely because I don't care about Transformers. I walked out of the 5th one. I've hated all of them except the first one, which was okay.
Then why are you reviewing this movie, you air fryer? If you're not a fan and have constantly disliked all the movies except one, then why bother not only watching it, but putting in the time and effort to make a review? Nevertheless, Mr. Lovell could still provide good points and assessments that could be overlooked by others, and if not, then that's still fine. As long as there isn't any shady editing and lying about the film, the rest of his video will be a pleasant experience. I'm gonna eat my words, aren't I?
And so I just like, why do I go to this? Why would I care? Travis Knight's directing it, sure, he's directed Kubo and the Two Strings, but I didn't like that either. And so just pairing a director that I don't care for with a series I don't care for just seemed like something that wouldn't interest me.
This dude is really laying on the hate for every aspect of this film. Even some shots at the director in his last movie. Wait, his last movie was Kubo and the Two Strings? Hang on a second.
2 hours later.
You know, that movie is pretty solid film, and for a first-time director, it's pretty impressive. I give it a solid like 6, maybe leaning towards 7. It's not perfect, but it's still a pretty solid film, and it's kind of weird how he's, I'm noticing a trend here in takes that are not good.
But finally, I decided to watch it, and turns out, it doesn't interest me. I don't care about this movie. I honestly, I find it very, very hard to sit through. There's almost nothing in this movie that I find really that redeemable, which is shocking considering all the stuff that has been stripped away.
As if anything he said previously would hint otherwise. Odds are he walked in already hating this movie, which now makes it hard to consider this a fair review. But I'm hoping I'm proven wrong.
But before we get into it too much, let's just start from the beginning with a all-animated action scene set on Cybertron, which is the Transformers home planet that has only been alluded to in previous films. But this film opens with an all-out action scene showing the fall of Cybertron, which is interesting not because of the action, but because it's just not right, at least in the context of the original movie, which I will be comparing this to a lot.
Did he just sideline discussing the quality of the scene and instead focus solely on how it doesn't match up with the other films? That's ludicrous. Assessing a movie's quality as a standalone film is as important as assessing its continuity to other installments, especially when writing a review for said film. Personally, I would want a review to be able to inform me of all possible ways I can gain value from it, and then judge from there if I should spend time to watch it. I'm in the camp that more information is better than a lack of it, which will explain this video's length.
Not just because it's a direct prequel to the first movie, but because it actually shares a lot of similarities to the first movie. But it's interesting to note that this movie and Transformers 1 do not line up at all. Both of them have completely different ideas of what's happening. The first movie is about the Allspark. That's the MacGuffin of the movie, the Allspark. It's the big giant cube of life that apparently gave Transformers life on Cybertron. And during the fight in the first movie, the cube drifted away and landed on Earth. And so the story of the first movie is about the cube and the Decepticons and the Autobots trying to capture the cube for one reason or another. And that's not what happens in Bumblebee. Bumblebee opens with this big action scene, and Optimus Prime turns to Bumblebee at one point and says,
I found a planet that's well hidden. Earth. You will travel there and establish a base for us. Once we've gathered the others, we'll join you. You must protect the planet.
And I went, wait a minute. What about the Allspark? What happened to that? I thought that was literally the whole point why they came down there.
Well, this movie is confirmed to be a reboot, but let's just humor the idea that it is supposed to tie into the other movies. It's no secret that the Bayverse is full of plot holes and inconsistencies, but I don't see the opening of Bumblebee contradicting the first movie to the degree he is presenting it as. We can assume that the Allspark is already sent away, as we also don't see Megatron, who is established in the 2007 movie, chasing it to Earth to an obsessive degree, to the point he stumbles into an icy prison. Optimus confirms other Transformers have already left, explaining why Jazz isn't present but other Autobot characters are. The Autobots being outnumbered and forced to leave Cybertron is consistent with all the other movies, having a 1-to-5 ratio between the two factions. Bumblebee being sent to Earth to set up a new home is not a flaw either, as it makes strategic sense as the search of the Allspark could take centuries. The only flaw I can see is the major convenience that the ideal planet to regroup on happens to be where the Allspark landed. This isn't Transformers Prime, where they reveal that it was done on purpose by a specific character, because the opening monologue confirms they lost track of the Allspark.
And the cube was lost to the far reaches of space.
But like I said, Bumblebee is a reboot, meaning these consistency complaints aren't valid.
I mean, maybe, potentially, the Allspark was lost in between the time when Bumblebee and Optimus Prime showed up, but it doesn't allude to that at all. It never makes mention of the Allspark. You never see it get lost. And the end credits scene of this movie is showing Optimus Prime coming up to Bumblebee and saying, "You did good protecting Earth," and not mentioning it at all. So, how does this connect to the first one, other than just in name? It makes no sense.
All this concern and questions about the Allspark, and it never compelled him to double check the status of the franchise and if Bumblebee is a fresh start. As if the different character designs, a different Cybertron, and no word of the Allspark wasn't clues enough. Apparently a Google is too much to ask for this film critic, let alone an assessment on the merits of this film in isolation.
And another thing that the first one establishes is that Shia LaBeouf found an old Camaro version of Bumblebee in some used car dealership.
Bumblebee drove up to the dealership to be found by Sam. That part of the film is not the plot convenience he makes it out to be.
And of course, in the vein of horrible prequel movies, they have to establish everything that an audience can remember. They have to show everything an audience can remember. So, you know how Bumblebee can't speak in the first one? Let's show how he can't speak. Well, remember how Bumblebee was a Camaro in the first one? Let's show how he became a Camaro.
Bumblebee losing his voice is not only important for the continuity you've been complaining about, but also for the story itself. His inability to communicate puts Charlie more in the dark about Bee's true nature and current mission, allowing for the plot to focus on Charlie without her being looked at as selfish and self-absorbed, since the fate of the Autobots would normally take priority over family troubles. It also presents an interesting challenge in writing to build a friendship between the two, with one of them being unable to speak properly, which makes the development more intriguing to watch. Bumblebee changing into a Camaro at the end of the film is 50-50, so let me break down what I mean. A Camaro showing up right at that moment for Bee to scan is incredibly convenient, but him changing into a new alt mode is a smart decision. Remember, the government currently knows about Bee and his current Volkswagen Beetle mode, so it makes sense to change modes in order to stay hidden from Sector 7. You know, because he's supposed to be a robot in disguise?
I don't care!
Then why are you making this video? Even as an angry rant, your complaints about the film aren't even accurate.
Why are you showing me that? It literally doesn't matter. There are some things that you probably should talk about, like the Allspark, and then there are some things that just do not matter, like Bumblebee being a Camaro. I didn't need to see that. Bumblebee could have driven off at the end of this movie as a Volkswagen Beetle, and I could use my brain to infer that at some point he would have become the Camaro in between the first one and this one. Why did we need to see that?
This dude hasn't concluded 3 important aspects of the film. 1, that the Allspark is likely already sent away at the start of the film. 2, the movie is a reboot, so they don't have to mention the Allspark at all. And 3, it's smart to change your look in order to hide from the authorities. The last complaint is the equivalent to suggesting Harrison Ford in The Fugitive that he shouldn't shave his beard after escaping police custody. Back to my point. Sector 7 knows he transforms into a beetle, so why keep the alt mode when he is trying to stay hidden?
And the last thing I want to touch on, at least lore-wise, with this Transformers universe, which is a stupid sentence.
I would like to reestablish that it is not okay to harass somebody even if they say some incredibly long statements, especially when it's spawned from their own ignorance.
Because none of the Transformers make any sense with themselves.
We have confirmation that he doesn't read the comics.
All of the movies are ridiculously stupid, but just because they're stupid doesn't mean I can't talk about it.
True, but it doesn't stop me or anyone else from pointing out when you're wrong about said movies. I recognize the faults of these movies and still love them for it like any parent is with their own kids, no matter how much pain I receive from them.
And interestingly enough, Bumblebee comes to Earth in this movie, Bumblebee, and yet in the 5th Transformers movie, The Last Night, he is seen fighting Nazis in World War II. So which is it? Did he come to Earth in the 80s, or did he come to Earth before World War II? It doesn't explain any of this. It just glazes over it and says, don't think about it, because it's stupid and doesn't make any sense. And we're just gonna make things worse, because not only do the 5 other movies not make sense, but now the prequel doesn't make sense.
The thought of checking if this is a reboot and reworking his review from that knowledge never crosses his mind. Worse, he assumes incompetence spanning multiple years from filmmakers, which is belittling behavior that I suggest dropping as a film critic. It doesn't help your career in the long term.
I left The Escapist in 2014 because parent company Defy Media refused to publish my review of Assassin's Creed Unity and jeopardized their relationship with Ubisoft. I'm famously blacklisted by Konami for being such a harsh critic. The PR company 47 told me EA wouldn't send me review copies because I'm a wild card. The only access I get in gaming comes from sources acting alone that need anonymity because they're not allowed to talk to me. My standing in the industry, that is to say, no standing, is the result of doing everything my former peers are incentivized not to do. I burned every bridge I had for not wanting to play with deeply corrupt organizations, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, Jim Stephanie Sterling is an example of living long enough to become the villain. Oh, what an inflated ego can do to someone. Such a shame.
So anyway, Bumblebee comes to Earth, John Cena gets blown up. Oh. John Cena survived that? Really? He's gotta be like a paraplegic now, right? Oh no, he's just got a tiny scar on his face. Okay.
How is that a tiny scar? I have tiny scars on my human body, both the length of my fingernails and the width of a toothpick. Those are tiny. That isn't. The movie itself is edited in a way to suggest that time has passed between the battle to the next time we see Agent Burns and when Charlie finds Bumblebee. We are also shown honeycombs growing inside Bee, which tends to take 7 days to 2 months for bees to construct. On top of that, I find it perfectly reasonable that a trained, muscular soldier played by John Cena can bounce back from that situation. After all, I've seen him recover from far worse.
You're shot and a building falls on you, and all you have to replace is a clavicle? You're the luckiest man alive.
Cool. So we haven't even met our main character yet, and there's just weird issues that I'm just completely flabbergasted by.
The thought still continues to elude him.
But funny you should mention our main character, because here she is. Don't you love that she's a female? Don't you love that she sniffed her armpits? Don't you love that she listens to 80s music? Don't you love that she doesn't like her mom for no reason? I just know I'm gonna love her. I relate to her so much. I'm gonna love her. Just by this opening scene, I'm gonna love her.
What did I just witness? Okay, I personally don't mind if the protagonist is a giant robot or a strange humanoid creature, but it seems a human female protagonist crosses the line for him. Now, everyone, this may be controversial, but I think it's okay for a female to sniff her armpits to check if she smells. Can we at least agree that complaining about a character listening to 80s music when the time period is the 80s is a bit silly? To this reviewer, we also can't have family trouble being portrayed in a movie, despite it being represented as a bad thing and is eventually repaired by the end of the movie. I don't know why he suggests we can't have a female protagonist start out with flaws in relationships that she must learn to overcome and repair as her arc for the story. What type of critiques and demands is this guy making with this criticism? And this is more of a personal request. Please cut out that dry laugh next time. It makes you sound like a dehydrated hyena.
Anyway, now our lovable main character gets bullied at work by stereotypical school bullies.
This dude is actually pretty chill in this movie. Instead of yelling about his shirt getting ruined, he just walks it off and takes his shirt off. He even compliments her later with her diving achievements and pushes her to dive off the cliff with him, winning the acceptance of the rest of the crowd.
I know you.
Sorry about that.
You were on the dive team with my little sister. I saw you in state a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this just got a whole lot more interesting. We have a championship high diver on our hands.
The fact we learn she has quit diving for a while and him still remembering her is noteworthy and prompts jealousy from those wishing to date him. Jealousy that leads to outwardly putting Charlie down to prevent possible romance from blossoming. Oh, that last point presents a reason for why these girls bully her, disproving the stereotypical mean girls allegations of bullies bullying the protagonist for no reason other than to make the protagonist more redeemable.
Then she goes into a car repair shop where she flexes her female empowerment on some unsuspecting bystander.
Be careful, dude. My female-hating incel bingo card is close to a bingo.
Hand me the 3/8, would you?
You working on a carburetor?
Mm-hmm.
I need the 1/2 inch.
I said the 3.
We can't have a man be corrected by a woman in a predominantly male profession, despite the film establishing her love and knowledge of cars from her father. This scene helps show she still retains her father's tutelage, and it's more than just female empowerment.
Haha, isn't being a family so much fun? Yeah, I like the 3 of us on this couch together, all alone. It would be a real shame if our daughter were to walk in. Oh wait, there she is. Just pretend like she isn't there. Just don't look at her. No, nobody look at her. Okay. Haha, isn't the TV great, guys? Haha.
If you're going to paint the movie in a negative light with a fake scenario, I recommend not having a visual that directly counters it.
I can't do this without you.
Nice to meet you. Interested in a new viewing? I've seen strangers. I'm starved. I've been
The family is blissfully unaware of her pain, of feeling separate from the family. Besides being outright wrong and a weak attempt at humor, this is incredibly mean-spirited at the expense of the main protagonist dealing with her own grief. I could chalk this off as dark humor, but this is a trend in this video that makes me consider otherwise.
Whole chapter in here about how people who smile more often actually have more friends.
It's unbelievable.
I really think it's gonna change your whole outlook if you smile more often.
Wow! Just look how hard our main character's life is. It's just so relatable, her struggle. My parents have always wanted me to be safe and for me to be happy, and I hated that!
There's no way this one person has never experienced parents that weren't on the same wavelength as them, especially as a teenager. Regardless, it's unfair to consider it a flaw for the movie to depict a family that isn't stable. There's also such a thing as a helicopter parent, unintentionally hurting their child by being too protective and too caring to them. I guess he's never experienced that. Lucky.
I mean, it couldn't be more relatable. I just love this main character. She's totally not a complete cliche and completely uninteresting. She's just great. Just the best.
A young female protagonist is unable to move on from the death of her father and is negatively throwing those emotions at others, specifically her own mother. The story follows her seeing the error of her ways and breaking out of her shell through the forming of a friendship with an injured alien. The alien recovers and leaves her, but what she experienced remains as she fixes her attitude and apologizes to her own mother. How does that sound in any way cliché? It's not the movie's fault that despite its efforts, he still finds her uninteresting, whatever that means. Let me explain. The term uninteresting and bored is too broad for myself and viewers to directly understand what is meant. Uninteresting could mean her attitude, her style, or her dialogue, but we don't know for sure because he doesn't specify what he means. Think of it as writing a novel. Instead of describing that apple is red, say that apple is as red as freshly spilled blood. Morbid, but now your viewer and or reader knows exactly, or closer to, knows what you mean. So that's part 1 of my coverage on Mr. Lovell's review. We are only 10 minutes into his video, so I have to cut it off here. Otherwise, I'll be starving you guys of a video for way too long. Also, Rise of a Beast is coming out soon, so I wanted to make a video on one of the Autobots of the movie by going over their interpretation from Transformers Prime. Have fun figuring out who I'm talking about. As for part 2, it'll be out someday. Probably when we get a break from Earthspark and Rise of the Beasts. Thank you guys for watching. As always, till all are one.